This is an excerpt from Rhonda Findling's memoir called Smithtown Girl. It's chapter 17, and its title is Fred. That was Fred. Do you remember him? My mother asked, hanging up the phone in the living room. Yeah, I remember Fred. I thought he was one of my dad's former high school students. A couple of years ago, he came to visit us in Smithtown. The Fred I remembered was tall and lanky, with a goofy, barely grown mustache hanging from his top lip. It was weird that he'd be calling Mom. I thought she and Dad were divorced now. How nice of Fred to call and check on us. He might even come over for dinner one evening, Mom gushed. But I could tell by the way Mom threw back her head, chirping with laughter every 30 seconds on the phone when he called again, that something was up. The fact that this man had to be at least 10 years younger than her thoroughly weirded me out. Fred came by on Sunday. Mom spent the 3.5 hours before his arrival dashing back and forth between the kitchen and the bathroom, alternatingly basting the roast and fixing her makeup. The four of us sat in the living room, sipping Cokes. We talked about Fred's job as a clothing salesman at some men's boutique in the city. If one were to judge the evening by Mom's reactions, he could have been Johnny Carson delivering one-line zingers. So I asked him, "You want to wear a yellow tie with that shirt? You've got to be out of your mind." Mom giggled loudly and wiped some tears out of the corner of her eye. I cracked a smile for Mom's sake and gave Fred the once over. He was different from the gawky high schooler I remembered. He was still tall and slight. His crew cut had become a golden blonde shag with long bangs. He dressed like he was one of the Rolling Stones. He was definitely cute. I even liked the way he flicked his hair behind his ears. He talked about rock music, about which Mom was hopelessly clueless. He wasn't as funny as Mom thought, but he was definitely cool and hip. I started to have a little crush on him, too. I turned out that evening, oh, my contact lenses. It turned out that Fred was 23, 10 years younger than Mom, which meant he was closer in age to me. She was the seductive older woman, vulnerable from a divorce, ripe for the picking, and I was jailbait. He came over the next weekend. The routine was the same. Mom put on enough lipstick to turn the whole East River red and wore her sexiest outfits. Nothing could have been worse than watching my own mom act coquettish with a guy 9 years older than me. On Saturday night, Fred started to sleep in my mom's bedroom that was separated from mine only by a wall. It was a miracle that I never heard them having sex. Sunday night, Fred wandered into my bedroom while I was doing my homework. We chatted about Nehru jackets and the Beatles. "You should try to be nicer to your mother," he suggested. "She gets on my nerves," I replied. "Well, she's going through a lot. So am I." "It's harder for your mother. Everyone's depending on her." Then suddenly he leaned over and kissed me, square on the lips. He smiled and brushed my shoulder with his hand. Then he left the room. When he was gone, I looked into the mirror, excited by the kiss, and wondered if he liked me romantically. The next morning, I was cramping from the first day of my period. I went to get a towel from my mother's dresser so I could take a shower. Fred was sleeping on the bed beside it, and I tried to be quiet, but he woke up. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice sleepy. "Getting a towel," I replied. "Sorry I woke you." "You look like you're in pain." "I am." "What's wrong?" Uh, Cramps?" I told him hesitantly. "You've got your period?" I nodded shyly when I found the towel and closed the drawer. "Come sit over here," he said softly. Sitting down next to him, he put his hand on my belly and gently rubbed it. "Does that feel better?" Actually, it did seem to soothe my cramps, but it felt wrong. I have to go. I don't want to be late for school, I said, and left the bedroom feeling weird. This strange scene with Fred and my mother's new adolescent behavior made me want to talk to my father desperately after all my disappointment and anger at him. I found his phone number in my mother's address book and called him. Picked up right away. Dad, can you come out here this Sunday? I said. I really need to see you. Then I started to cry. Tears came out of nowhere. Dad sighed, sounding annoyed. I can't understand what you're saying when you're crying. I had a flash of him telling me when I was a little girl, if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. I don't want to talk about it on the phone, I said. Can you just drive out to Long Island? We haven't seen each other in a long time. I have to do something with Rosa on Sunday, so I can't. I'm sorry. I felt so hurt I could barely take it. I have to go now, I barely managed to say, and hung up. I went to my room, threw myself on my bed, and cried, humiliated that he'd rejected me for Rosa. Didn't he already spend every day of the week with her? Didn't he want to see me? Why should I even have to ask him? How could he be so cruel to me? It was hard for me to get through the next few days. My father's rejection caused a horrible pain that literally hung over my heart. It stopped me from ever wanting to feel vulnerable with him again. This seems like it's the end or something. One moment, please, while we straighten out our technical difficulties. Okay, I've got it. Sorry, Rhonda. The next weekend, Fred came to visit us again. Mom was making breakfast for all of us. Giggling over some stupid remark, Fred made, smiling, her head thrown back, hands on her hips, and she looked like she thought she was Marilyn Monroe. Disgusted and fed up, I stormed out of the kitchen and slammed my bedroom door. Mom came to find out what was going wrong. You're acting like a teenager with Fred, I exclaimed. It's gross. You're just upset because you think I love Fred more than you and Drew, Mom said, sitting on my bed. A woman can love a man and her children at the same time. One doesn't interfere with the other. What are you even talking about? I cried out with frustration that she wasn't getting it. You're acting like you're my age. I'm the teenager, not you. Well, she said, Fred is going to keep coming here whether you like it or not because I love him. Get out. Just get out of my room. I hate you, I screamed. It took every ounce of strength I had not to yell after her. No wonder Daddy left you. Instead, I put on my new Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album. That night, when my mother and Fred were watching TV, I threw some clothes in an army knapsack. I decided to take the train to Greenwich Village and become a hippie. I'd listened to enough Janis Joplin to know how it was to be done. I'd go back to the restaurant where my father had taken me to meet Rosa and get a job as a waitress. I'd put on a lot of makeup so I could look older. Or if I needed to get farther away, I'd take a train or bus to San Francisco and live in Haight-Ashbury. Thinking I was making a clean getaway, I walked out the back door. I got a block away when my 9-year-old brother came running after me. Get back to the house, Drew. Where are you going? To the train station. I can't stand her anymore. Are you going to Dad's house? Are you kidding? I hate him too. And I'm certainly not going to that bitch Rosa's house in Brooklyn. I'm going to Greenwich Village. By yourself? Tonight? Yeah, I may even go to Haight-Ashbury. Nothing's better than anything's better than living with her. If you go, then I have to be alone with her. My heart melted. How could I be like my father and abandoned my...
Thanks so much. You too.
Okay. My heart melted. How could I be
Sorry.
like my father and abandon my little brother? Standing under the street lamp, his thin, boyish frame protected by a red windbreaker, Drew imitated my mother's stupid cheesecake pose. Oh, Fred, he said, trying to mimic my mother's voice. You're a dreamboat. Let me stroke your mustache. Oh, Fred, you're so cute, but I'm so beautiful. I giggled. It was actually pretty dead on. I thought your head was going to spin around like in The Exorcist when you were yelling, I hate you. Drew's eyes almost popped out of his head, imitating me. He laughed out loud at his own stand-up comedy routine, and pretty soon I was laughing too. He took my army knapsack, and we both turned around and headed back to the house. Mom's relationship with Fred lasted only one more week, thank God. I never found out who ended it, but I figured it had to have been him. 23-year-old Fred had all his fun with the teacher's ex-wife until he got bored and moved on. Mom's flirting had gotten on my nerves, but I'd always felt sad watching her as she giggled on the telephone with Fred. She never would have admitted it to me, but I think her thing with Fred was her way of trying to get over her pain about my dad. Thank you. There's Rhonda Findling from Smithtown Girl, her memoir.
That was great.